Hi, I'm Craig Brown, and for the last 40 years or slightly more, I've been a humourist, largely writing for Private Eye magazine, which is the foremost satirical magazine in Britain, and specialising particularly in parodies. So I'm a bit like a ventriloquist in a way. I put words in other people's mouths, words which they would almost have said if they were on a sort of truth drug, and obviously with the intention of making people laugh. And I have noticed coming here to India and doing 2 performances of my parodies, and sifting through them, I've realised how parochial Britain is in some extent, in that if I've done a parody, say, of a British politician, well, in a way, I hope the politician would be unknown in India, because they're usually rather insignificant people, and part of the point of my parody is to make them seem even more insignificant. But of course, if I try and perform them in India, in Mumbai, it'll be completely meaningless to an audience. So I've had to get rid of about 95% of my parodies and just concentrate on people that I think people in India will know about. The trouble with satire at the moment and parody in Britain is that events are overtaking us, and so events are becoming more humorous in perhaps rather a grim way than we've ever imagined, and so things have become beyond parody. I mean, it's particularly obvious with President Trump, who I first spotted obviously I spotted him before he was a candidate, but then when he became a candidate and started his tweets, I started doing those tweets also for American magazine, parodying the tweets. But his tweets now, if you read them each morning, there are about 8 new ones every morning. They are completely and utterly ludicrous, and you think, well, how can I make them funnier? They can't be funnier. So often I just reprint them, and everyone thinks, oh, that was very clever of you and funny. And of course, it's just Trump himself talking. Or, for instance, in the Brexit negotiations, the complications and the sort of dismal quality of those is very, very hard to make funnier. Anyway, so that's one of the problems we all face. Just recently, about a year ago, I published my first biography, because I also write books, and it was of Princess Margaret, the Queen's younger sister. And when I was writing it, and people would say, oh, what are you writing at the moment? I'd say, I'm writing about Princess Margaret. And conversation would come to an end, because I could see that people thought, well, why is he doing her? You know, she died 2002, a rather forgotten figure, and people thought, well, I must have been paid to do it, but it certainly became embarrassing, so to the extent that I didn't even mention it in conversation by the end. But anyway, when the book came out, people, it was a different kind of biography, a sort of fractured biography, so it wasn't chronological, and it saw her from lots of different angles. It's a book called Ma'am Darling, 99 Glimpses of Princess Margaret. And so it's a bit like a sort of hallucinogenic biography, and has chapters in it are about the people she might have married and didn't. Like Picasso had a big crush on her, and so I have a chapter on if she had been Mrs. Picasso, how the two would have got on, and that kind of thing. And so it's a semi-satirical biography. It's been my first real success as a book, actually. The others have sold rather dismally, but this has done very well, and everyone thought it was going to be a disaster, so that's been a little happy story in my life. I wouldn't presume to offer people advice for jokes, other than, I think, if you're writing parody, I mean, there aren't very many people who do parody. It's a bit like people who spin plates or something like that, you know, or play with yo-yos on a professional basis. It's not a big field, but if you want to do parody, I'd say the mistake that people make is trying to be too funny. And so with my parodies, I tend to use about 80% of the original words of the people. So say I'm doing V.S. Naipaul, I will use a lot of his words and then just do little tweaks. So it's more like, I'm more like a caricaturist in a newspaper. You have the basis of the face, and then you just exaggerate certain elements. And so that would be my advice. Don't try too hard, I suppose. That's the best advice for a humorist. Don't try too hard. People don't like it if they can see you doing the joke.